And now for another segment of Real Talk about men and women.
Give me a kiss to fill a dream on my imagination.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Brock Lawley, the Atheist Antidote. Thank you for listening to my podcast. Today, we're going to get back into the mutt and mire, which is speaking about men and women with a form of candor and honesty. And there is very little in this world that is riskier than doing that. But that's what we're going to do. That's what we're going to do. We're going to put a helmet on and we're going to march bravely into the fray. All right. I could get myself in a lot of trouble for this, but I find there to be an enormous amount of truth in this, and I think it's worth talking about. And I kind of wonder what people think about this and how all wet I am or whether I'm right. You know, when I look at 2013, and when I look at the years that the bigger chunk of the years that I grew up in, what I see is a society that is spending an enormous amount of time reprimanding masculinity and men, and just constantly trying to refine men into this new mold, this new modern man. And I'll be the first to admit that many of these things have affected my psychological outlook and my psyche and the way I, choose to dress and behave and all kinds of things. I mean, how couldn't it? It's a culture I grew up in, right? But when I look at it objectively, I find it to be quite curious. On every level, men, they're reprimanded. They're pushed back on for their instincts, for their natural response to things. And I don't necessarily completely think that's bad. I mean, I'm a big fan and a big advocate of refining oneself and constantly working at oneself. I mean, I've heard this said before, and I think this is a very, very wise piece of advice. Your greatest battle in life will be you, will be your own nature. And to pursue discipline physically, mentally, intellectually, by way of your character. I mean, that's huge. That's what we should spend our time doing. And I really do believe that. And so obviously, there's nothing wrong with men being forced to be their best selves and not let, our cardinal nature, for example, or our harshness at times. There's nothing wrong with that having refinement. But of course, I think we've gone way beyond that. I think we've gone to the point where we're trying to turn men into women. And we start at a very young age. I mean, think about how we educate our children. We throw them in this room for 8 hours a day. And, that at a very young age, at 4 or 5 years old, I mean, as a young boy, that's craziness. That's craziness. The way we educate our children is not doing our young men any favors. Young men, when you're 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, you are bursting with untapped energy. I mean, you want to talk about alternative energy? Find a way of tapping the energy of a 6, 7-year-old boy. It will power the universe. So to throw that kid in a classroom and this is just craziness. This is not allowing room, possibly not being realistic about the nature of a young boy, in my opinion. And certainly it favors the nature of young girls. Now, don't get me wrong, I know, I've met girls. My niece is a ball of fire. There are young girls that are just as restless. But by and large, I think women have a little bit of advantage in this educational environment. I think they can still themselves better. I think they can concentrate better. I think they can multitask better. There's just some different things. That's neither here nor there, really, but I just wanted to point that out. That's a good example. But there's so many things, Men, think about our fashion and how it's hybrid. It's just a hybrid of feminine fashion. I mean, you go into a clothing store. Sometimes I do this with my wife, and I don't even know which direction to go. Which one's the male section or which one's the female section? They basically look exactly the same. I don't think that's a coincidence. I don't. Now, there's a lot. That's a whole conversation right there. But that's another example. But then even, how we're always reprimanded for our observing a female's appearance. And how somehow this is now viewed as disrespecting women. And I mean, don't get me wrong, to verbally bark out some sort of sexual innuendo to a woman. That's disrespectful. But to notice the physical, shapely beauty of a woman and to compliment her on this, or now you can get, sexual harassment classes at your place of employment for saying something like that to a woman. I mean, think about these things. List them down in your mind. All these different things. How the masculine nature, we can't have anymore. There used to be places where men could go and just be men and just speak like men and talk like men. All those have been dismembered. All those, that's sexism. We got to include women in everything, and if we don't, all we're doing is trying to keep the woman down. No, these are good things. These are good things for the male nature. This is a good experience for men. And of course we know this because when you look at history, this has always been this. I remember a little while ago, I had a poker game and all the wives came. Don't get me wrong, I love them. They're wonderful women, but come on, seriously? That's just not acceptable. But that's just the world we live in. Women just have to get involved in it. They have to poke their head in it. Because if they don't, somehow you're repressing women. And then, here's the irony. Then you'll turn around and read articles about how women are like, where are all the men? I don't know where the men are. I can't find a man. Well, I'll tell you what happened to the man. You put your boot on his neck. You put your stiletto heel on his neck every time he tried to be a man. And ladies, don't get me wrong. There's plenty of blame on the male side of things in society. Plenty. But we're putting this specific thing under the microscope of the Atheist Antidote podcast right now. And we're studying it. So bear with me. Rein yourself in. I'm just saying, listen, you have to ask yourself, why all the attention on refining and, I don't even think most of the time it's bettering, but let's just use that word, bettering the masculine nature, and yet none of that is happening on the female side of it. So if you say something like, well, maybe females should try to be less emotional. Maybe you should try to be more rational. Oh my gosh! How did he... I'm beside myself! Which, of course, when the woman says that, she's literally making my case, right? When she flies into an emotional henfest fit, then she literally made my case. But they're just beside themselves that a man would let that roll off his tongue. But of course, that's true. There's nothing wrong with a woman trying to do that and better herself in that way. There's things about the female nature that need to be reined in, just like things about the male nature. But if you bring those things up, you're called a sexist. You hate women. No. If it's good for the goose, it's good for the gander, except it's not. You see what we've done here? Food for thought. Food for thought. Some gender conversation to chew on. Thank you for listening to the brave Atheist Antidote Show.
Visit the Atheist Antidote YouTube channel and follow him on Facebook and Twitter.
So is love. This eagle heart of mine is singing.